We are going to talk about quadratic word problems. For these problems, they're not going to end up being nice, pretty numbers, so we can't factor the equations that we deal with. The good news is that we will use the quadratic formula, and instead of having to use exact square roots and breaking them down with factor trees, we can just type it into our calculator and figure out what the decimal answer is. So let's do a couple examples. A stone is thrown directly upwards from a height of 30 feet with an initial velocity of 60 feet per second. The height in t seconds after it's thrown is given by s of t equals negative 16t squared plus 60t plus 30. When will the stone hit the ground? Okay, that's a lot of words in here, pretty much just to say this equation tells you height. When will the stone hit the ground? So when is the height equal to 0? So this whole equation is our height equation. So let's write it out. And when is my height equation? 0. That's it. Okay, well, how do we solve quadratics when they're equal to 0? We can complete the square, we can factor, we can use the quadratic formula. I tend to use the quadratic formula for all of these because completing the square is messy. There's an a value here. Factoring isn't necessarily going to work. So let's do quadratic formula. This is nice because we already have it written in the right form, so we can quickly pick out our a, b, and c values. It's already equal to 0, so we can quickly pick out our a, b, and c values. So x, or t in this case, equals negative b plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, so for word problems, you can use decimals. You don't have to leave complete exact answers with square roots in them. But just to make sure you don't make any kind of careless mistake, let's just type these numbers into our calculator to figure out what that is. Okay, so this is actually negative 60 plus and minus the square root of 5,520. So I just typed the numbers under the square root in to just simplify that, and now I can actually say, well, what is the square root of 5,520? Oh, it's 74 point. Use 3 decimals here, and your final answer you're going to just want 2. So use 3 decimals throughout, and then simplify to 2. So this whole thing equals negative 60 plus or minus. When I typed my square root into my calculator, I got 74.297 over negative 32. Okay, so now I just have numbers, which means that I want to actually add across the top and actually subtract across the top and then divide by negative 32 to figure out what my 2 answers are. So if I did negative 60 plus 74.297, I would get a 14.297. And then if I divided by negative 32, I'd have negative 0.45. All right, now let's subtract. Negative 60 minus 74.297 gives me negative 134.297. And now if I actually divide by negative 32, I get 4.20. Here's where I here's where I round to just 2 decimal places. Make sure you include units. This is the t value, or the time. And so we're trying to figure out, when does the stone hit the ground? Well, we can't go backwards in time, so we only want to use the positive number. You cannot go backwards in time. Time can't be negative, so your answer is positive. Let's do one more example just to make sure we've got everything down pat. Okay, a ball is thrown from an initial height of 2 meters with an initial upward velocity of 13 meters per second. The ball's height, h, in feet after t seconds is given by h equals 2 plus 13t minus 5t squared. Find all values for t for which the ball's height is 9 meters. All right, there's a lot of stuff going on here just like before, but it's telling me this is the height equation. 2 plus 13t minus 5t squared. This is my height equation. And what does the question ask? Or what does the statement say? Find all values of t for which the ball's height is 9 meters. So when is this height equation equal to 9? Okay, we are going to solve now. The way you solve a quadratic is completing the square, factoring, or using the quadratic formula. I'm going to use the quadratic formula because it is the fastest way for me. In order to use the quadratic formula, you have to have it equal to 0. So I need to subtract my 9 over to the other side. And I'm actually going to rearrange it because I like to see the squared pieces first. So it's, I don't know, I just like things in order. So A, B, C. Make sure you subtract that 9 over before you say what your C value is, because otherwise, if you use a 2 in here, it's not going to be the correct answer. All right, quadratic formula. Negative b plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All right, type in the numbers under your square root, just these numbers first, into your calculator, just so you don't get confused with all the different calculator buttons and things and messing up. Okay, so when I type this in, I get a 29 under my square root, and now I can actually say, well, what is the square root of 29? 5.385. Okay, this is all, there aren't any square roots anymore because I got rid of them. So let's actually add and actually subtract to see what my two final answer numbers are. If I add negative 13 plus 5.385, I get negative 7.615. And then if I divide by, oh guys, there's been a typo this whole time. I shouldn't have put a 10 there. From the very beginning, a was negative 5. So now when I multiply by 2, this should be a 10. I apologize. Luckily we caught it. Whew. Okay, so when I divide by negative 10 now, I get 0.76. Okay, now if I do negative 13 minus 5.385, I'll have negative 18.385. And if I divide that by a negative 10, I'll have 1.84. This doesn't specifically ask for, it just says find all values when we're equal to 9, so both of our answers are the ones we want to use.